Hey, thank you very much for allowing me to be here. It was a pleasure to be invited. I think the focus of the discussion with me is really about strain selection. And strain selection is, it's more than just what are you growing, it's why you're growing it. And I think you have to kind of go back and understand really where the genetic packaging came from that we use today. So you go back into the late 60s, cannabis comes into the US. It's not landrace. Landrace is shit that grows naturally. If a human put his hand on it and grew it, it's not landrace, it's cultivated variety. So what you got was cultivated variety shipped in from other countries. But that cultivated variety was selected for centuries for usage by that population. So there's been all this work done on what we use, but the fact is that all the real work on selection was done in the centuries prior. So all the cannabis that comes into the US has already been proven to be successful from the populations that grew it. They had terp profiles they liked, they had chemotype profiles they liked, and morphologically the plant worked in the environment. And so all that cannabis comes in, and then we take it, and basically after the mid-80s, it stopped coming in. So like around 83, 84 was basically the end of the importation of cannabis into America at a level that was really going to influence us, and we went into being a domestic producer, right? So cannabis goes from exterior production to domestic production. So when we go into domestic production, we're no longer working with any of these profiles that are available. We work with the ones that we have right now, and we start to make choices. And we make choices with these, but the problem is we don't hold the varietals correctly. We start to jumble the genetics. We lose a lot of the sexy shit. In the era after 83, 84 was when camp came in. So 83, 84 is like this twilight time. I caught a case in 83, that's why I always remember it so well. It was a time where everything changed from exterior cannabis to interior cannabis. And when cannabis went indoor, it started to proliferate around the United States in all these locations that it wasn't grown in. And because of the smell of cannabis was so detectable, because it was so similar for so long, it was almost impossible for people to cultivate and not get caught. So what happened was right around, I'd say end of the 90s, early 2000s, we successfully wiped out most of the really pungent aromatic cannabis right out of the gene pool. So, and there was guys like me that were wiping it out because I was somebody who was putting together all these operations to run indoor operations. And these were all black market, and there was no charcoal technology at that time. And so we were using really high-end ozone systems to blow out seams, but that was complicated and complex, and it has a whole bunch of other effects with it you have to be careful with. So most people really just had to deal with, you had to be ballsy. And the problem was not a lot of cats have a lot of balls in real life. And so you ended up trimming a lot of weed right out of the system. So the problem is, we got rid of all this incredible cannabis that had centuries of marketability. And we go forward with whatever we're left with. So we take whatever we got, and we start to work with it. And now we have populations now we work with. And we start to say, hey, this is what people like. But the reality of it is we're looking at this very skewed picture of the genetic population. And we don't really understand that so much of the varieties of cannabis that had been created and built had been proven over thousands of years to be effective to those population bases. And so when it comes into doing selection, so many people kind of get lost as to what they're using. They don't really realize that the potential for selection is unlimited, and that your job is to fully understand where your product's going to go. And so for most people, they really have no destination in mind. They're just growing pot, and they're hoping that it sells. And they say, well, I'm going to grow OG because OG sells, and I'm going to grow Blue Dream because Blue Dream sells, and I'm going to grow this because it sells. But does it sell for you? And was it the right choice for you? And the right choices for you in strain selection is you're trying to find things that work for you in your specific location. Now, when we talk in an indoor environment, and we're going to call it a closed loop system where we control all variables, then we can have an ISO certification. I can do that in anywhere on the earth, identical. But if you're not going to work a certified room that all variables held constant, if there's any type of shift, then that variable has to be taken into effect to go along with your strain selection. because it has a direct impact on the varietal itself. And when people talk about phenotype, genotype, that's genotype. That's expression of the environment on your product. With outdoor, that's called terroir. It's what the whole basis of outdoor high-end wine is based off of. And so what people have to be able to realize is that just because something worked well for your partner on his farm, it doesn't mean it's going to work well for you on your farm. And your market is different than his market. And so when it comes to, I did a discussion on this. It was a terp profile, thank you. And it was on choosing terpenes for specific purposes. And a lot of it was when people choose cannabis for smoking purposes, and it's going to be in joint form or pre-rolls, then it has to be a sesquiterpene market. You have to choose for sesquiterpenes. Sesquiterpenes are multi-bond terps. They're terpenes that hold under temperature. So when I have a monoterp, it's very aromatic and light, typically a citrus, and you smell it and it attracts you. So if your market is like a delivery service and you're a 5-star delivery and people want to look at the product, they want to take little pictures of the flower and put it up online, they want to make sure they smell it a little bit more before they take a little tiny hit, that's a mono market, because that's all aromatic in the nose, and because they consume it all in one shot, they get mono and sesqua at the same time. But if that isn't your market, and these are joint smokers, and you're not working with sesqua cannabis, then you have cannabis that has no flavor after the first hit. So basically it's just pop. So you completely lost it. So you can have a strain that has no monoterpenes to speak of, and no one would want it in the nose, but in a pre-roll it's the #1 seller because it holds in the mouth. And it has to be seen. You have to understand this, or otherwise you're putting the wrong products in the wrong places. So what I see is selection done in the wrong rooms. So I'm going to go do indoor work, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it outside, and I'm going to make an assumption that it's going to perform similarly. And we're talking radically different situations. And so what has to happen is individuals have to start to make sure that the varieties that they're using were really sifted for their specific situation. We have beautiful varietals that we've chosen that work well on the coast, but if I move them into a situation where the night temp's about 15 degrees higher, I lose the monoterps. Change the strain dramatically. And it can go from a top 5 in the emerald to not in the emerald. Same cut, just move it across one ridge. So strain selection is really trying to understand how do you optimize your situation. And I think that most individuals don't really look at it from that perspective, because right now it's kind of confusing, and we're talking about where does cannabis go. And I'm just going to give you a brief little, I wish I had a little picture here, but if you take a piece of paper and rip it in half, 52% of it is flour, 48% of it is oil. That's the current California market right now. That's today analytics. Those analytics are from legal stores, and they are only reflecting legal store sales. So not black market, not people who have kind of quasi permits, straight permitted numbers. This way we can narrow this little thing down. So 48% of the California market of the store, pen. And if you take a picture, draw it on your piece of paper, put one little pencil line on it, that represents all concentrates. Shatter, snap and pull, butter, rosin, fresh frozen. The other 29 slices of pie are pen. So the pen market is 29 times bigger than the concentrate market as we know it. So the distillate business is 29 times bigger than all forms of concentrate together. This is an important thing to understand, because for a lot of you guys, it's going to radically change your whole production world, because with plant-derived terpenes, I don't even need to pull the terps off the cannabis. So in a minute, it becomes irrelevant what kind of cannabis production facilities grow at a large level, because they're just going to take it and bulk it. What did I hear today? The Salinas guys had problems, or was it where was he from? Nevada maybe? Nevada. Nevada guys had problems with fungals. They just threw it in the kitchen and blew it. And then now it can move. Well, the problem is the pen market in California is 30 times bigger than the concentrate market, and it is 1/2 of the total. So how does small farmers actually enter that massive market? That's a tough competitive market. And so, and it's important to understand it, because people will just, well, I'll just blow it, I'll turn it into this, I'm going to fresh freeze my whole farm. I think that's what Salinas is having to do, because a lot of these guys having some of the problems are having to fresh freeze. And so when we start taking a look at, we're going to turn our good cannabis into all these other high-end concentrates, That's only 1/30th of the entire market. So all of us are going to put our package into the same little pencil slice and try to move it? You won't. And I think it's an important thing to understand that when you're talking about what you're going to do with strain selection, it's about scale. And so for a lot of people, what's the assumption of big? Big right now is like 2.5 million square feet. That's big. So anybody under that isn't that big. And so for us, like for me, I'm 20,000 square on my farm, and I have a nursery and stores, but for my farm selection, what I did, and I do every year, is I do a huge amount of R&D to find varietals that will work for me on my farm that require little input, meaning fungally resistant. We have all those fungal numbers coming up. I just had to pull a strain out of my library for outdoor dep because it carries too much yeast. So indoor, where it came out of, incredible. The product, incredible, but it'll hold too much yeast in a dep. So we did the test, we find out, damn, can't use that one. So it allows me to keep sifting and sifting until I find specific cuttings that make specific products that I can then enter the market with. And then that's where I focus the whole bulk of my farm. I'm not just trying to put pot out, and then I take all the stuff that I test and I can have that blown, and then I can have that as super concentrates, because the differences in the phenotypes and the lines are too separate to try to reveal in terms of the buyer to want to buy his bags. But if I blow it, then I can put it as a concentrate aggregate through. So when you do the testing and when you're doing all your pheno runs, you don't have to lose these products. It isn't waste. You just combine them. They shouldn't be that dissimilar. And then you can put it together. But what it does, it lets you find outliers. And what you're going to do is, ideally, is you would find people who work in a similar environment as you do. So for me, when I do outside testing, I'm in a unique place for my farm, which means I have exceptionally high wind load. So my wind load determines the height of the plant to a degree that you have to see it to believe it. But it'll take a plant that'll do 14 foot in my yard and it'll make it 7 foot. It'll trim it in half. So my farm doesn't allow me to give you data off of large stuff, but it lets me give you data off of exceptionally rough environment, tough conditions. So I find other people that have that same dry, desiccating, windy, huge DIF, my night and day temp might jump 65 degrees. So I find people who have similar conditions, and then we can work together to test. And then I can find other people, because I own a nursery, I do this nonstop. I put together people who have similar operations, and what it does, it allows them to be able to team up and start to run through larger populations of test plants so they can find the phenotype that didn't get mold, didn't get rot, and the market accepted it at a high velocity. And these are the things that you have to go into, because as we start moving forward, every production cost is money off the profit. And we're getting marginalized right now. I'm not quite sure where it's going to end up. But I've seen it change dramatically. And so I know that, for me, I try to use varietals that don't require buffers or Band-Aids. And so I go through and I look, and I determine, what is my market? Where do I have a sales market? And what does that market want? And I stick with it. And I don't try to cover 17,000 different directions, because you can't. And you work on these pieces, and pretty soon you start to become known for some specific things. And I think that for so many of us, I would call us niche farmers, craft farmers, anybody under an acre, because an acre is really not very big in normal ag, but we'll call acre below, we're going to have to find differentiation. Because otherwise what you just have is, you go to a store, Washington's a good example, you can't smell the cannabis. So when someone goes to the store, you can't smell it. You walk in and there's 500 choices, and you ask the person selling it, give me something gassy, give me something fruity, and what's popular? And in a single sentence, you just cut 390 farms right out of the loop, because you can't personally make the decision. You can't ascertain it. And so what it is it's building these specific things that draw an attraction and attention that lets you differentiate yourself from others within specific fields. And what I explain to people is that when people talk about terpenes and we want to break up profiles, there's like 42,000 terps. So it's way too many categories. And what people don't catch is that there's things that create smell that aren't terps, and those are esters, those are plant alcohols. And so plant alcohols can't be captured in extracts. That's why you don't smell skunk in an extract at all. It can't be captured, it's too volatile. And so if what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do a project, strain selection, of going through the old skunk lines from the 80s. So I went and mined all over the world, skunks from the early 80s to 90. And I'm gonna go back into those plants and I'm gonna go dig into those profiles to pull out flavonoid profiles, terp profiles that were super attractive then, and then re-release it now. And that way what I'll have is I'll have something that differentiates me from the masses again. And so I constantly look to re-differentiate myself from the population, but not just to be different, but to be different in a way that would make sense. And so much of this is an individual piece. And I mean, in a perfect world, all of us would be working our own lines. All the farms, all the products, all the brands would really be their own lines, and we wouldn't work off of clonal, so to speak, except for reproduction. But the clones that you used would be coming from the moms you held from your direct line. And as we go forward with marker-assisted breeding, we'll be able to get the plants to get into a much higher range of similarity, so we can go from seed. But right now, the market's too picky to take seed unless you blow it and then turn it into something else. The problem with the blowing and turning something else is that over the next couple years, for a lot of us that were heavy cannabis, this is the right direction, you have lab cannabis coming. And that's something that I'm not quite sure how to work with. And lab cannabis is chemically derived, synthetically created cannabinoids. And that shit's coming over in barrels from Korea right now. And plant-derived terps. Now, plant-derived terpenes aren't bad, but you can basically recreate pretty close most terpene formulas. And so in a minute, since you have half the people in California smoking pen, because we're gonna basically call it half. We'll take 1/30th is all oil, so the whole pie is pen, and 48% of the pie is pen. So we're gonna say half of California is burning a pen. You think they really care where any of that shit came from? At all? Is as disconnected from the weed as one could be. That's the problem. You've made a disconnect. As soon as you started to change flower to other substances, the relationship changed. And so I'm not sure how many more years we really have left in what we do because of the way it's moving right now. And I'm somebody who geared up to be current, but I'm like, holy shit. You're having a change financially in the demographics of who buys cannabis. So you're having this radical shift. People are all talking about this upscale market, but upscale people don't usually smoke a lot of pot. They like cocaine and champagne, and that's not what we sell. So cannabis is for a blue-collar group, and I mean, I've been selling pot my whole life. I've been in the game 40 years, right? So I'll be 52 this summer. I'm 11 years old, I started smoking. I was dealing at 12. I was 16, I was already in the joint. So I've been here the whole time. I just know that what we're seeing is some changes, and financially it's going to cause us some real problems. And it's trying, I think, for so many of us craft people to really be able to get this out to the public about the appreciation of the genome, appreciation of craft, because it's what really allowed some of the organic craft movement to move forward. You don't have heirloom tomatoes in your yard because they wanted you to have them. You had them because other people really said, listen, it's better tomato. And it was about sharing the info and sharing the tomatoes. And so for us, so much of the stuff we do is been collaborative, but in a kind of unique way where none of us really get along sometimes, but we don't get together to move the pack. If I needed 100 pounds, I'll call you. And you don't have to be my buddy. That was the beauty of the drug business. You didn't have to get along, you just had to go do the business. And now we have to get along a little better because we're really working on a different level. And so many of us are so small that compared to what's coming, you're gonna get wiped out. Like I said, I looked at a picture of an op the other day that was 2.25 million. When I was in Belgium, I'm talking to the Belgian government, and they're showing me 1 million square foot supplemental greenhouse on the first floor, and the basement was molecular biology labs. So when we're talking like this is your whole nother level here. Whatever we're doing in America, it doesn't make a difference. We're still playing hillbilly here. This is at a different level globally, and we're gonna have to deal with it in a minute, but our markets right here are compressing too, because right now we have 8 times the cannabis in California that the legal market can handle. So you get 8 times the amount of weed, and it's already going down. And so how are you gonna survive? You're either gonna undercut everybody's price and go bigger, or you're gonna differentiate and be unique. And I think that for the majority of us, that's possible in the small craft level. That's really the basis of this little lecture, was understand what you're doing and really try to define what is my market, who's consuming it, why do they consume it, and am I going the right direction? And I think that right now you have such a disconnect between cannabis sales and cannabis production. It's, everybody's a grower. I'm like, you have sell any pot? No. I'm like, holy shit, you gotta sell it. You can grow 1 trillion tons of it, that's nice, now sell it. And that's the disconnect that's happening, that people who are producing cannabis aren't quite aware that someone's gonna have to wanna buy that crap down the road at a price. And so much of this is being able to understand these little subtleties and say, hey, how do we get ourselves into these situations? And I always go back to the same thing. You work collaboratively with people you know. I work with 4 people basically up and down the West Coast. So I got 3 other friends on the West Coast that are my age. And we hunt. And so every year I'll find one thing. I mean, I'm looking through a river of genetics, but I'll find one cut a year. And my buddy will find. So we might find 3 to 4 cuts a year. 3 to 4 different unique things. That's 4 people that are geared up with full operations, that are professionals. Like professional meaning that's what you do for a living. You just go hunt all damn day. If I can get one good one a year, ooh, I'm killing it, because that allows us to move into the next season. And so you work collaboratively, and what you're gonna find, the whole West Coast is really a common market. It shares similarities. Each state has similarities depending on where you're selling it. Blue Dream #1 in every top city in the West Coast. Portland, Seattle, San Francisco. Because people like euphoric cannabis. They want stuff that's pleasant, it doesn't knock them out. Anybody below that, fuel-based stuff. And that's a lot of that is off of opiate addiction. When I first got into the dispensary industry, I started running all my own research off the people coming in. I was curious as to why people buy what they buy. And I just asked them privately. But I know from statistics that if I do a 1,000-person random sample, I got a pretty good answer. And I did a random sample of 1,000. And I found out that, it was funny because I'm not on pills, but California is loaded on opiates. And that's why the OG Kush was so hot. And that's why every state opens up OG. I know it's gonna blow because every state has an opiate issue. And it's not about cannabinoids. We started playing around with 14% headband from Lumpa, all the way up to 32% OGCDs from Ganja Rebel. So we're going to the full range of cannabinoids in fuel, and none of that mattered. It was terp profiles. And so what we started to find was that certain cannabinoids, certain complexes and terp profiles work for some really interesting things, but that's what the huge dominance of OG is. OG is dominant because all the individuals that are opiate users can transfer usage to OG. And when they descheduled they took the level 3 to a level 2 on the opiates, it created like 30, 40 million junkies. So like right now, you got a junkie problem about to blow up in America. That is your OG population. They're the ones that buy it. And people who want to get high like me, who need strong cannabis because all the good skunk has been weeded out of the system. So it's trying to resurrect things that we used to use and understand why things we have today is so dominant. And people don't look at it like this. They don't look at it from a data-driven point of view. That's why I love when the homie was showing the figures up here. He was like, this data is crucial. It lets you understand how you're going to exist. And everybody in the room is looking at data sheets now. This shit isn't new. But the point is, it's how you look at it and what you're doing with it. And like I said, for me, a lot of it is with the fungal issues now, you have 2 different standards. You have the California state, which is actually pretty good. And then you got the Berkeley, which is really, to me, a skewed standard designed by a company to accelerate microbial testing. So somebody wants to make money, and they're gonna screw all of us. So for 10,000 years, we've been smoking weed and not having problems, and all of a sudden today I'm gonna die from it. There's a problem, but it depends on who is doing these tests and who is ascertaining the entry point. You need to make sure that you're sifting your cannabis and having those tests done. Because if you produce cannabis that's inherently prone to these problems, you're gonna fail next year. And so the testing process, it breaks your heart too, because there's always some shit you really wanna see move forward in life. But it just doesn't. But what it does, it allows you to take a look at all the current stuff. For all of us that are organic guys, I'm not worrying about myco. You got to worry about it in Salinas, Central Valley, other places because of overspray. You're in certain locations by vineyards, you got to overspray. If you had, where we are in Humboldt, you had a lot of places that had all this 2,4-D and all these Agent Orange kind of contaminants used all their ground for doing the logging. So there's places that are contaminated too outside. It doesn't make a difference. You got to make sure that you're not in a dirty spot. And then this way, at least, you know, the cannabis is now can be produced in some fashion, you can start to find what cannabis varieties work for us under the current regulations. Whatever you used to use or what you want to use really is irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference, and that's the truth. It's about what is going to be allowed to move into the system. And so much of this is just such a tough thing for people to admit, that they so badly want to grow this, but they're really not qualified because their location isn't correct and their distribution isn't correct. And so much of this, as I said, this is a strain selection piece, but it's really about first determine what you're doing with the end product and who's it going to go to. And then try to figure out how do you maximize your values. And so much of it is really based off of what you can do. So I would say, you know, always share your information with your friends. You can't do this alone. Be careful who you call a friend. That's the key part. But work together collaboratively, and what it does, it'll let you start to sift through some beautiful genetic material, and the whole West Coast is really a similar market. It's not as unique as people think. California is just the biggest one. But each city, when I go to each major city, I take a look, and I go to the stores, and I buy the product, and I talk to the growers, and I'm like, same deal. There's key things that happen in those places, and then there's outliers, and there's people who take the time to really drive a higher level of the product. That product can then be convinced to salespeople to sell because they can see the quality. So that's why I went to Washington. I realized that the people who did the good craft work, and they could get the right pricing, were actually able to sell the product, because when they went into the dispensary, they could show the product to the store people, and the people could say, wow, that is a differentiated product. I clearly see that is a unique terp profile. I can clearly see that this is quality. And I would recommend it, because the people who are selling the product at the counter, they may have to take 400 samples in, but if they just sold the same thing every day, all day, only one thing, they wouldn't give a shit. They just want to do business. So I may have 800 items on my shelf, but if I only sell one of them to the level that it's making the money of 800, I'm not complaining. And so it doesn't make a difference. You have to have inventory, but if you go to go to a smoke shop, there's 40 blunt wraps. There's only 2 that are empty, blueberry and regular. I don't even know why they sell the other ones. And I'm not even a blunt smoker, but I'm somebody who pays attention to weird little details like that. There's only 2 that move. So which one would I want to mess with? Blueberry and regular. You can go fuck with the other 40. They sit there for years. Those 2 move. And you gotta be able to look at it like this, and that's what you're gonna realize, is that it's not selling out, and it's not cheapening up or dumbing down your game. It's the opposite. You are fully tightening up your game. You just tighten it up what direction the product moves, and then from there it's really trying to define all your production methodologies. And that's why this was really cool to be part of today, because I actually work with a lot of these guys privately. I use Grassroots on my farm. Forever Flower and I have been partners for a long time doing stuff together. I'm working with Andy on potting equipment. I got the Biotherm guys. We're doing a piece on a thing. So to me, I'm laughing because it's all the guys I work with in business. But it's how we all succeed too, because we all share our info. And it's crucial. So much of this stuff has to be treated like that, or you're not going to do it. Everyone thinks they're so smart. But I'm in rooms with guys where every guy in the room has got a PhD, and they have like $500 million to back them. It's kind of hard to compete with these guys. You have to really work on pure craft and knowledge of the market. And while we still have 52% of a market, 4 years ago it was 100. It was 100, 4 years ago. There was no concentrate. I remember I put the first dab tool in Humboldt County I put in the store. There wasn't any goddamn dab rigs in Humboldt. I had to bring them in because I wanted to sell the oil. I got the oil from the Emerald Cup. We took the winning entry from the Emerald Cup. I was able to contract with him and have him start supplying me the oil. And I had the nastiest oil, and no one knew how to smoke it. There was no tools, there was no dab rigs. We had to get glass blowers to make all the conversion rigs to take old pot bongs and make them into dab rigs. Pens didn't exist in cannabis form. We're talking 4 years. It's 48% of the market right now. Like, do you think this is slowing down? Holy shit. So we only got 52% of the market to attack as flower. And that's the 52% that we're all going to basically live in. And it's trying to understand, hey, what are you working with, and what direction are you trying to go, and where do you want to really define yourself in it? Because you can't spread yourself out that big. You can't go work 100 lines and do them right. You just can't. It's very difficult to develop something correctly. So in a perfect world, the farms would have their own unique genetic material, and we would all work and develop and work off our lines that worked on our property. And over the course of, like at Humboldt, we've had a radical shift in climate this year. So Humboldt County, which was previously 26 years ago, 100 inches of rain, got down to 30 inches of rain. Now we're back up to 100 inches of rain. If you don't think that 30 to 100 just suddenly affected all the farmers, everybody who thought DEP occurs all year round in Humboldt. Humboldt doesn't rain. Yeah, it does. And so everybody just got wiped out. But if your genetic material was deep enough, you would have been able to find cultivars within the pool that handled those climactic shifts also. And it's important because we're going to go through these. We're going to see these radical climactic situations, and outdoor cannabis is really, in California, the cheapest, cost-effective route to go. And if you don't grow it outside here, I don't know, I mean, where would you do it outside? And so the problem with it is trying to get the genetic material that has enough information to work with all these changes and shifts so that you're able to keep a basic cannabinoid terp package current through time. That's hard. Tobacco, I studied tobacco just so I could understand how they do it. They do it off of a 4 to 5 year blend. So tobacco is 5 years worth of harvest blended. So when you're smoking 2017, you're smoking 2012 too. And it allows them to blend 5 years of tobacco continuously so that nobody ever can tell the difference. So I'm not a cigarette smoker, but Marlboro is a $290 billion brand. It is the #1 brand on earth. On earth. That little Philip Morris, that PM, that's the most valuable symbol on the planet. Bigger than Microsoft, bigger than GE, bigger than everybody. Because they figured out how to standardize the drug. And matter of fact, we give it here. Who invented extraction? The cigarette companies. What do you smoke when you smoke a cigarette? An extract. It's an extract soaked in paper. A cigarette, if you cut it open, is paper soaked in tobacco extract. Who invented the pens we use? Tobacco industry. Who came up with all the addictive terpene research? The tobacco industry. And what is the addictive terpene research? Citruses like mandarins, lemon, lime, orange, grapefruit, all of those things, those monoterpenes that drive us to grow for cannabis, that is the most addictive terpene packages, and that's what they infuse into pens to drive the addictive response in tobacco. So with all that technology and concepts of how they do that, they're going to come and do it here. It's coming. So, but you need to know it because you go, I got you. My OG's stale. Add a little bit of citrus to it and see what happens. It's not stale anymore. Because we can start to change and fluff stuff up. But why doesn't citrusy stuff hold? Why is the Skittle hot, but why is it really better as an OG hybrid? Because citrus gets you uplifted, but it doesn't have any hold. So it's a quick ride. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. But these heavier fuel-based, earth-based strains hold. So when you start to combine them, you can get the sexy. People love the citrus, but if you could allow them to stay high an hour longer, they would buy one less bag a week. And for them, they would come back to you to buy it because it's saving them money. It's really about trying to understand what are you giving the individual and how do they have it. I talk about strain selection with OG. OG is really simple. OG is basically a giant family, but within it, there's 3 marketable directions. Earth, which would be Ghost, and then citrus, which would be like SFVs, and then fuel, which is like HA or Blood Diamond, right? And so every year, OG moves to one of those places. So 2 years ago, it was Earth, then it was citrus, this year it's gas. And then they're gonna get tired of gas, and they're gonna want Earth. Then they're gonna get tired of Earth and want citrus. But it's always on top of an OG base. So OG is its own world now, but basically as I look at it from someone who produces it in clonal form, and then also grows it in farms, and then sells it through dispensary, I go, I got you. We can break it up into those different directions. And so this way, I can still work with OG and always hold an OG market as long as I move within the trends. And I think that prior, you didn't have to do this, but like, I mean, I chase this shit. I'm all over I'm chasing. I'm looking to see what's hot, where, and why. Because if it's just a splash, I don't care. Because those are things that you have to create the splash in order to benefit from it. So if you create something that's really bright and you can move it, you do so. But if there's something that has a hold and a secondary buy and it starts to build, I want to be able to see that market building. And then I want to be able to experience and understand it and say, I got you. This is a quality product. So I went up to Oregon and I went and picked up the dog walker. So we brought the dog walker back into California. And the dog walker is specifically because it produces so heavily of such a beautiful fuel-based cannabis. So hard to get that specific cut. I had to go all the way into the woods to get the damn thing. But the point of it is that it allows us to bring these fuel-based back, but on a shorter, statured, quicker flowering, heavier yielding plant for more of an indoor commercial production for those that want that direction. And so because I focus on craft farmers with my craft lines, but if you're a large guy, I'll provide you with the cuts you need. And for commercial people, that's the right direction. When we went into a lot of these plants, same thing. We go through the lines and I just try to figure out where is the right intersection between grower ability and marketability. And if you can find that intersection, then ultimately that's called profitability. And it's really where you want to put the work in on this. And so much of this is just really being patient. And for a lot of people, they're not qualified to make the decision on the sale. And then the people who sell the part aren't qualified to make the decision on the grow. So you got to be able to have a pretty ego-free little group that works on this, where you all basically back up and you just say, hey, listen, it's real or it's not. And if you can't do that, then you go find you somebody that can. You will bring you in someone who understands marketability, where they straight up know the shit's not going to go where it's going to go. And it can't be questioned. You have to know that that's real, and then that, because you're about to invest a lot of time and money and you'll drown here if you don't. And so once we do the research, we know that we should be good for at least a season. And if we can do this correctly and we can see where this trend is going to go, we can actually push and ride through. So like, what's an example right now? We know that anything that's got exceptionally loud monoterpene is unbelievably popular right now. So I loaded my whole farm with high monoterp shit. Didn't even care. It didn't make a difference what it was. It made the difference that it was high monoterps and that it would work for me as a cultivator. So it had made through all the sift. I go through the book and I say, yes, it works for me in all these categories. And its signature is exceptionally bright. So that way right now, it's exceptionally bright cannabis that is coming in because everybody's coming in, I can just smell it. A lot of the new smokers don't even have the ability to handle strong cannabis, so who gives a shit how strong it is? I mean, I'm coming out with 10% strains. And I'm straight up going to run with them because the new market can't handle the stuff that I smoke. I can't get high with you. I'll cripple you. And it's not even funny. I'm serious. And I laugh and it makes me feel like a drug addict, but I'm like, holy Christ. That's most of us that are career puffers. We really can handle some smoking. That's not the new people. And what they need is they need strain selection that's designed for them. And for them, that would be a balanced cannabinoid ratio. And for some people, they would say, well, just give him CBD pot, but CBD pot breaks the THC back too much, and it doesn't give you some of the subtle euphoria. And for a lot of people who want to get high, they want that little change and shift. So I hunt those things, and when you start to find that, I go, boom, now I found it. So I found what I looked for. I found a beautiful cherry pie, a back cross out of Gene that I had to hunt through, and then we bred through to get back. And out of it, I found a cut that's gorgeous for that purpose. And I have a 10% ultra loud cherry that's hard in the mouth that if you smoke it with anybody, they'd be like, wow, that's really good pot. And you perceive that you're really high, but you don't have the anxiety that high THC gives you. So I used my girlfriend as the tester because for 2 years I was trying to find something that she would really enjoy that just, she said, hey, that's right. And so I said, I got you. And she's pretty discerning, and so I used her as a guide. But the point was I used someone to hunt to find a piece, and now we can release this piece. But the point is, that's a market. These 10% lines, you go to a dispensary, they won't even buy that shit. Wait till January 1. Wait till all the new people come pouring in. That's when you want to be able to have these other choices. And will that last for a while until they get acclimated and they want a little more maybe? But then we adjust. But the same thing is we locate terp packages, being profile packages that work, and we work within them. When someone said OG was a fad, just like perp is a fad, perp is one of the longest running plants it could be because perp is actually Garberville Purple Kush. So Garberville Purple Kush to the perp, then to cherry pie, then to the cookie. That's all perp profile. So the Garberville cherry, that Garberville Purple Kush that was so popular back in the late 70s, early 80s, was so successful in terp profile that it passed through all these plants and is still burying you alive. Why are people still smoking it? Because I call it the billion-dollar profiles. Trainwreck's got a billion-dollar profile. Something in Trainwreck made it just absolutely dominant. Someone said it's not relevant right now. Ghost Strain Haze. It's relevant. Ghost Strain Haze is a dominant strain in the indoor market, and Trainwreck is the majority of it. And when you smoke it, you pick up, if you don't smoke any Trainwreck in it, it's not the right one. So the cut that I have just won a big distillate competition, but it's because it's so trainy dom, but it has OG-like effects in terms of the high. But you see what I mean? Trainwreck, which has been around for 30 years, still influencing varietals. The perp. Perp's dead. Really? Cookie's dead? Interesting. Cookie ain't dead. And so, but you go all the way back to the Garberville Purple Kush to track that package backwards. So if you were somebody who held the Garberville Purple Kush and you worked with it for the last 30, 40 years, you would have been in business. If you got a hold of the OG in 90, 91, you would have been in business till today because the profile held. And all you had to do was go in it and twist it around a little and find some little things that made people, that's interesting, a little freshener. And lo and behold, you're still there. You don't have to throw out the cultivar. You don't have to throw away what you're doing. You just have to understand that people pattern and they just do. And you have to understand the patterns. You know, people are wearing plaid, they'll be wearing plaid again. It's the same with your cannabis varieties. That's why for me, I'm looking so hard for stuff from this golden age of cannabis because we killed it all. And we don't have any. And I actually didn't kill the varieties. It's funny, I actually banked them all, but when I got raided all those times, I lost them all in the raids. So over the course of a couple of drug busts, you lose libraries. So I was looking for plants that didn't have smell, but that's not what I grew myself because I didn't have that problem. I had a facility that I could blow any smell out of. So my life was different than the people I consulted to, but nonetheless, all of it's gone. And that's really what I'm trying to do is go back in time into these profiles that had an incredible connection to people, and then all I gotta do is put them on the table again because people will want to eat it again. It doesn't make a difference. If you can understand how Garberville Purple Kush is the cookie, how Trainwreck is Ghost Red Haze, you realize any of these things move forward. And it's really about trying to go back in time to pull some of these things out so you can find something that's just different enough in a positive way that defines you. And that begins you. You don't have to have a trillion of those, you just have to have one. And that's the one you use to define your farm. This is where you get this product from. This is why we like the product. And all of a sudden you start to have differentiation. And that was all based off strain selection. So I'm gonna let you guys go. If you got any questions, man, I'm down to chat. I'll be here till the show's over. So if anybody got any questions on this stuff, I wanna chop it up. If you're ever in Humboldt County, you wanna check me out in person, I'm in Wonderland Nursery in Garberville. Come by. And thank you for letting me be here.